The text message glowed on my screen like a ghost reaching from beyond the grave. "I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery now. Tell no one." It was from Mom's phone. The phone they'd buried with her body just hours ago. Rain hammered against my apartment windows as I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, still wearing the black dress from the funeral. My fingers trembled around the phone, reading the message over and over until the words blurred together. This had to be some sick joke. A cruel prank. Maybe grief was making me hallucinate. I'd heard about that. People seeing things, hearing voices after losing someone they loved. But I checked the call log. It was definitely her number. The same number that had been silent for 3 days, ever since the hospital called to tell me she was gone. Heart failure, they said. Sudden and unexpected. My mother, Evelyn Miller, only 53 years old, vibrant and healthy just a week before, was dead. Or so I thought. Let me back up. My name is Grace Miller, and until that rain-soaked October evening in Portland, Oregon, I thought I knew my life. I was 29, working as a freelance graphic designer from my small apartment in the Pearl District, trying to make a name for myself in a city that valued creativity but paid poorly for it. I was the only child of Evelyn and Richard Miller. Mom was an artist, a talented painter who specialized in watercolors of Oregon wildflowers. Dad was a real estate developer, one of the most successful in Portland, with his fingers in dozens of commercial properties downtown and luxury condos along the waterfront. Growing up, I'd always known something was off about my parents' marriage. Mom was gentle, soft-spoken, always deferring to Dad's decisions. He controlled everything from what we ate for dinner to where we went on vacation, which wasn't often because he was always too busy with work. But I never questioned it. That was just how things were in the Miller household. Dad was the provider, the decision-maker, and Mom and I were supposed to be grateful. The last few months had been strange, though. Mom had become more withdrawn, and the few times I managed to get her alone, she seemed nervous, constantly looking over her shoulder. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd just smile that sad smile of hers and say, "Everything's fine, sweetheart, just tired." But her eyes told a different story. They were the eyes of someone trapped, someone drowning slowly and couldn't call for help. Then came the hospital call. Dad was supposedly in Hawaii on business, or so he told me. Mom had collapsed at home, and the housekeeper found her. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was already gone. Heart failure. The doctors said it sometimes happened, even to seemingly healthy people. I was devastated, but what made it worse was that Dad didn't even come back for the funeral. He sent his condolences via text message, said he was tied up with an important deal and would be back in a few days. That should have told me everything I needed to know about Richard Miller, but I was too consumed by grief to see it clearly. The funeral was today. A gray, miserable Portland day with rain that felt like the sky itself was weeping. I stood at the graveside with my black umbrella, watching them lower Mom's casket into the ground, and Dad's chair next to me remained conspicuously empty. A few relatives whispered about his absence. His own wife's funeral, and he couldn't even be bothered to show up. Some muttered that he'd always been cold, but this was beyond heartless. What I didn't know until I scrolled through Facebook that evening after the funeral, was that my father had posted a photo just hours before Mom was lowered into the ground. Him and a woman I didn't recognize, both in swimsuits, holding champagne glasses on a Hawaiian beach, the sunset blazing behind them. The caption read, "Life's too short not to enjoy it. Cheers to new beginnings." I stared at that photo for a full minute, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. His wife was being buried, and he was celebrating. The woman in the photo was young, maybe mid-20s, with the kind of artificial beauty that came from expensive procedures. Her name tag said Scarlett. Some of Dad's business associates had commented with congratulations, as if they all knew something I didn't. That's when the anger started to replace the grief. That's when I began to wonder if Mom's death had been as sudden and natural as everyone claimed. I was sitting on my couch, still in my funeral dress, scrolling through Dad's social media with a growing sense of horror and rage, when the text message came through. Mom's name lit up my screen, and my heart stopped. I dropped the phone like it had burned me, then scrambled to pick it up again. My hands shook so badly I could barely unlock the screen. "I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery now. Tell no one." I read it 3 times, 4 times. My mind raced through possibilities. Someone had stolen her phone from the casket. This was a prank by one of Dad's enemies. I was having a breakdown and imagining things, but something in my gut, some primal instinct, told me to go. If there was even a chance, even the smallest possibility that this was real, I had to know. I grabbed my keys and ran out into the rain without even changing clothes or grabbing an umbrella. The drive to Riverview Cemetery took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My mind was a chaotic mess of hope and terror. The windshield wipers beat frantically against the downpour, and I could barely see the road through the sheets of rain. What if this was real? What if Mom was somehow alive? But how? I'd seen her body at the viewing. She'd looked so pale, so still, dead. The cemetery was dark when I arrived, just a few streetlights casting weak yellow pools on the wet pavement. The gates were technically closed, but I knew a gap in the fence from my teenage years when my friends and I would sneak in to tell ghost stories. I parked on a side street and made my way through the gap, my heels sinking into the muddy ground with every step. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but fog was rolling in thick and heavy, turning the gravestones into shadowy sentinels. I made my way toward Mom's grave, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. The fresh mound of dirt was easy to spot, darker than everything around it, flowers already wilting under the rain. My breath came in short gasps, fog puffing from my lips in the cold October air. This was insane. I was insane. Standing in a cemetery at night, looking for my dead mother based on a text message. Then I saw her. A figure standing under an old willow tree, about 30 feet from the grave, barely visible through the fog. My heart stopped. The figure was small, slight, wrapped in a dark coat with a hood pulled up. Lightning flashed somewhere in the distance, and for just a second, I saw her face. Mom's face. Pale, drawn, exhausted, but alive. Unmistakably alive. I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what I was seeing. Mom stepped forward, and even her walk was the same. That slight limp she'd had ever since she twisted her ankle hiking 5 years ago. She pulled back her hood, and in the dim light, I could see tears streaming down her face. Real tears. Warm tears from a living person. "Grace," she whispered, and her voice cracked with emotion. "Oh, Grace, I'm so sorry." I don't remember running to her, but suddenly, I was there, touching her face with trembling hands, feeling the warmth of her skin, the realness of her. She was solid. She was breathing. She was alive. We both collapsed to our knees in the wet grass, holding each other, sobbing. I felt her heart beating against my chest, felt her tears mixing with mine, felt her arms strong and real around me. How? I finally managed to choke out. "How is this possible? I saw you. I saw your body. They buried you today." Mom pulled back, gripping my shoulders, her eyes intense and frightened. "Not here. We can't talk here." "Come with me." She pulled me toward the tree line, where I could just make out the shape of a car parked on an old service road. It was a beat-up Honda Civic I'd never seen before, not the luxury sedan Mom usually drove. We climbed inside, and she locked the doors, glancing around nervously as if we were being watched. In the dim interior light, I could see her more clearly. She looked terrible, thin, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. But she was alive. That's all that mattered. She was alive. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" My voice came out harsher than I intended, but I was beyond confused, beyond scared. She took a shaky breath, gripping the steering wheel even though the car wasn't running. "Your father tried to kill me, Grace. He tried to kill me, and when that didn't work fast enough, he decided to make sure I'd never be a problem again." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, that's insane." "Is it?" Mom turned to look at me, and her eyes were hard in a way I'd never seen before. "Think about it, Grace. Really think. When was the last time your father treated me like a human being? When was the last time he showed me any kind of love or respect?" I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out, because she was right. Dad had treated Mom like an employee at best, an inconvenience at worst. But murder? That was something else entirely. Mom continued, her voice gaining strength. 3 months ago, I found out something I wasn't supposed to know. Your father has been embezzling money from his company, moving funds into offshore accounts, preparing to disappear. But there was a problem. I own 45% of Miller Properties. It was part of our prenuptial agreement, protection my father insisted on before we married. If Richard wanted to liquidate everything and run, he needed my signature, or he needed me dead. My mind reeled. But you would have given him a divorce, you would have signed whatever he wanted. That's what I thought too. But it's not that simple. A divorce would have triggered an audit. His crimes would have been discovered. He needed me gone permanently, and he needed it to look natural. Mom's hands trembled as she pulled a folder from the back seat. Inside were medical records, bank statements, and dozens of printed emails. He's been poisoning me, Grace. Small doses of digoxin in my food, just enough to weaken my heart over time. I didn't realize it at first. I just thought I was getting older, more tired. But then I started noticing the pattern. I'd feel worse after meals Richard prepared. I'd have heart palpitations after drinking the tea he'd bring me every night. I felt sick. "Why didn't you go to the police?" "Because I had no proof, just suspicions. And your father is one of the most respected men in Portland. Who would believe me?" I needed time to gather evidence, but I was running out of it. Fast. 2 weeks ago, I was in the hospital with what they thought was a heart attack. Your father showed up with papers, Grace. Papers that would have transferred all my assets to him. He tried to get me to sign them right there in the hospital bed, told me it was just an update to our estate planning. but I refused, and that's when I saw it in his eyes. He was going to kill me, one way or another. So you faked your death. I could barely believe I was saying these words. Mom nodded. I had help. Martha Rodriguez, a nurse I've known for years, she believed me. She helped me stage everything. We found someone, a Jane Doe from the morgue, similar build and age, someone with no family to claim her. Martha switched the medical records, the dental records, everything. And I gave myself a drug that mimicked death for several hours, long enough to be declared dead and for the body to be moved to the funeral home. Martha was there during the switch. The woman you saw at the viewing, the woman they buried today, wasn't me. I stared at her, trying to process this elaborate plan, this desperate escape. Where have you been? Hiding, gathering evidence, building a case. But Grace, I need your help now. Your father knows something is wrong. He called my real phone, not the one in the casket. He knows I'm alive, or at least he suspects. We're running out of time. That's when my phone rang. I looked down at the screen, and my blood ran cold. It was Dad. I showed Mom, and she went pale. Don't answer it, she whispered. But it was too late. My finger had already hit the accept button, some automatic response I couldn't control. Grace. Dad's voice was smooth, charming, the voice he used when closing business deals. How are you holding up, sweetheart? Fine, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Just getting home from the funeral. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there. This deal in Hawaii is critical, but I'll be home in a few days, and we'll have a proper memorial for your mother. In fact, I'd like you to come by the house tomorrow evening. There are some papers we need to go over regarding your mother's estate. There it was, the same thing he'd tried with Mom. What kind of papers? Just formalities, inheritance documents. I want to make sure you're taken care of, Grace. You're all I have left now. His voice was thick with fake emotion, and for the first time in my life, I heard my father clearly. He wasn't grieving. He was planning. Planning how to get rid of the last obstacle to his escape plan, me. Okay, I said, keeping my voice small and vulnerable, the way he expected. What time? 7 o'clock. I'll have dinner prepared. We can talk about your mother, remember the good times. He paused. I love you, Grace. He'd never said those words to me in my entire life. Not once. I love you too, Dad. I lied, and hung up. Mom was staring at me with wide eyes. You can't go there. Yes, I can, and I will, but not alone, and not unprepared. Something had shifted inside me during that phone call. The grief and confusion were hardening into something else. Something cold and sharp. You said you've been gathering evidence. Where is it? Hidden, in a safe deposit box at a bank in Beaverton under a false name. We're going to need a lawyer, a good one. Mom smiled for the first time since I'd found her. I already have one, Charlotte Wells. She's been helping me put together a case for the past 3 weeks. She's expensive, but she's the best financial crimes attorney in the state. Over the next hour, sitting in that car in the cemetery parking lot, Mom laid out everything. The offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the shell companies, the falsified contracts and the kickbacks, the network of corruption that stretched across Richard Miller's entire empire, and the poisoning. The medical evidence Martha had helped collect, showing the digoxin levels in Mom's blood, the timing of her symptoms, all correlating with Richard's presence. We have enough to put him away for decades, Mom said. But we need to be smart. If we go to the police now, before everything is airtight, he could run. He has the resources to disappear and never be found. We need to trap him, Grace. We need to make him think he's won, right up until the moment we destroy him. I thought about that photo of him on the beach with Scarlett, celebrating while I mourned. I thought about all the years Mom had suffered in silence, all the manipulation and control. I thought about how he'd tried to get me to sign papers too, to make me complicit in whatever scheme he was running. Tell me what to do, I said. The plan was risky, maybe insane, but it was all we had. I would go to the house tomorrow night as planned. I would pretend to be the grieving daughter, vulnerable and trusting. And while Dad was busy trying to manipulate me into signing documents, I would find evidence. The safe in his office, the one behind the family portrait in his study. I knew the combination. He'd never bothered to change it in 15 years, too arrogant to think anyone would dare steal from him. I'd get into that safe and photograph everything inside, then get out before he realized what happened. It's too dangerous, Mom protested. If he catches you, he won't. I've spent my whole life watching him, learning how to read his moods, how to stay invisible when I needed to. He thinks I'm weak, Mom. Thinks I'm just like you, easy to control. He has no idea what I'm capable of. And as I said it, I realized it was true. I'd spent 29 years being the obedient daughter, never questioning, never challenging. But that person died today in the cemetery, buried alongside the woman they thought was my mother. Whoever I was now, I was someone different, someone harder. The next evening, I drove to the family house in the West Hills, a massive modern structure with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. It had always felt cold to me, more like a museum than a home. I'd moved out 6 years ago, as soon as I could afford my own place, desperate to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Now, pulling up the long driveway, I felt my stomach clench with anxiety and anger. Dad answered the door himself. The housekeeper must have been given the night off, which was both good and bad. Good because there'd be fewer witnesses to whatever happened tonight. Bad because I'd be alone with him. He looked the same as always. Tall, handsome, in that distinguished way older, wealthy men could pull off. Silver hair perfectly styled, wearing an expensive cashmere sweater and slacks. He smiled warmly and pulled me into a hug that made my skin crawl. "Grace, sweetheart, come in, come in. I've made your favorite, chicken piccata." Another lie. He'd never cooked a meal in his life. He'd obviously ordered takeout and plated it himself to make it look homemade. The dining room table was set for two, candles flickering, wine already poured. It was a seduction scene, I realized with disgust. Not a romantic one, but the kind of seduction he used in business. Make the target comfortable, ply them with food and alcohol, lower their defenses, then move in for the kill. I sat down, forcing myself to smile, to play the role. We made small talk through the first course. He asked about my work, my apartment, whether I was seeing anyone. The concerned father act. I kept my answers vague, sipped the wine carefully. I wasn't drinking much, just enough to make it look real. I needed to stay sharp. Finally, over dessert, he brought out the papers. "I know this is difficult timing, Grace, but these things can't wait. Your mother had assets that need to be properly transferred. The house, the shares in my company, her art collection. It's all going to you, of course, but we need to sign the paperwork to make it official." I picked up the top document and pretended to read it, but I'd spent enough time working with contracts for my design clients to recognize legal doublespeak when I saw it. This wasn't transferring anything to me. This was me signing over power of attorney to Richard, giving him complete control of everything that had been Mom's. "This looks complicated," I said, playing dumb. "Maybe I should have a lawyer look at it first?" His smile tightened. "That's not necessary. This is standard estate stuff. I wouldn't put anything in front of you that wasn't in your best interest. I'm your father, Grace. I want what's best for you." "I know," I said softly. It's a lot to take in. Mom just died. I'm not thinking clearly." I let my voice crack a little, let a tear slide down my cheek. Dad's expression softened. He thought he had me. "Of course, sweetheart. I understand. Take your time. But the thing is, there are tax implications. If we don't file these papers by the end of the month, your mother's estate could lose millions. I'm just trying to protect what's yours." "What's yours?" As if he'd ever cared about protecting anyone but himself. I nodded, wiping my eyes. Okay, I'll sign. But can I use your bathroom first? I need a minute to compose myself." "Take all the time you need." He was so confident, so sure he'd won. It was almost sad. I went upstairs to the bathroom, locked the door, and pulled out my phone. A quick text to Mom. "I'm in. Going for the safe in 5 minutes." Her response came back immediately. "Be careful. We have backup plan if you need it." I waited exactly 5 minutes, then flushed the toilet and ran the water. When I came out, I could hear Dad downstairs, on the phone with someone, his voice low. Perfect. I slipped down the hall to his study, my heart hammering in my chest. The room was dark except for the city lights streaming through the windows. I closed the door silently behind me and went straight to the portrait of our family that hung on the far wall. It was from when I was 10, all of us dressed in white shirts and khakis, fake smiles plastered on our faces. I lifted the frame away from the wall, revealing the safe behind it. The combination was my birthday. I'd always thought it was sweet when I was younger, proof that Dad cared about me. Now I realized it was just the first number that came to his mind, the easiest to remember. I spun the dial carefully, listening for the clicks. Right to 18, left to 4, right to 91. The safe door opened with a satisfying snick. Inside was a treasure trove of crime. Stacks of documents, a laptop, several USB drives, and a burner phone. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything, working as fast as I could. Bank statements showing transfers to offshore accounts, contracts with forged signatures, emails discussing kickbacks and bribes, and then, buried at the bottom, something that made my blood run cold. A vial of clear liquid with a medical label. Digoxin. He'd kept it, the poison he'd used on my mother. Whether as a trophy or because he planned to use it again, I didn't know. But I photographed it, my hands shaking with rage. Then I grabbed one of the USB drives, the one labeled insurance, and slipped it into my pocket. I was about to close the safe when I heard footsteps on the stairs. Panic flooded through me. I shut the safe as quietly as I could, straightened the portrait, and looked around for an escape. The study had a small balcony. I could hide out there, but if he came outside, I'd be trapped. No choice. I slipped through the French doors and pressed myself against the wall just as the study light flicked on. Through the glass, I could see Dad enter the room. He wasn't alone. Scarlett, the woman from the Hawaii photo, was with him. She was even more stunning in person, wearing a tight dress that probably cost more than my rent. Dad poured them both a drink from the bar cart, and they sat down on the leather sofa. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't notice the portrait was slightly crooked. "How'd it go?" Scarlett asked, her voice sharp despite the baby doll appearance, like taking candy from a baby. "She'll sign by the end of the week. Once I have power of attorney, we can liquidate everything and be gone before anyone knows what's happening." Dad leaned back, confident. "What about the wife? You're sure she's dead?" "I went to the funeral myself. Or rather, I paid someone to verify the body was in the ground. Evelyn's dead. Finally." The woman was more trouble than she was worth. He said it so casually, like he was talking about getting rid of an old car. "And the daughter? Grace? What if she starts asking questions?" Dad laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. "Grace is exactly like her mother used to be. Weak, trusting. She worships me. She'll do whatever I say. And if she doesn't..." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. If I didn't cooperate, I'd end up like Mom. Or like he thought Mom had ended up. Dead. I'd heard enough. More than enough. I waited until they moved to the bedroom, their laughter fading down the hallway, before I carefully opened the balcony door and slipped back into the study. I made my way downstairs as quietly as possible, grabbed my purse from the dining room where I'd left it, and walked straight out the front door. I didn't run until I was in my car, didn't breathe properly until I was 3 blocks away. My phone rang immediately. "Mom, did you get it?" "All of it. And more. He's planning to kill me too, Mom, as soon as I sign those papers." There was a long silence. Then, "Meet me at Charlotte's office. Now. It's time to end this." Charlotte Wells was everything I'd hoped for in a lawyer, and nothing like I'd expected. She was short, barely 5 feet tall, with gray hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that could cut glass. Her office was in a nondescript building in downtown Portland, and when Mom and I arrived just after 10 p.m., she was still working, surrounded by stacks of files and legal pads covered in notes. "Show me what you got," she said without preamble, and I handed over my phone. She scrolled through the photos I'd taken, her expression never changing. When she got to the digoxin, she nodded slowly. "This is good. This is very good." Combined with the medical evidence Martha provided and the financial records Evelyn already gave me, we have enough for multiple federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, attempted murder. "How long before we can move?" I asked. "I can file with the FBI and the SEC tomorrow morning. They'll need a few days to verify the evidence and build their case. In the meantime, you both need to stay hidden and stay safe. Richard will figure out something's wrong soon, and when he does, he'll be dangerous." Mom reached out and took my hand. "We have a safe house. A cabin near Mount Hood that's in Martha's name. We can go there, wait it out." "What about me?" I asked. "He's expecting me to come back and sign those papers." Charlotte smiled grimly. "Call him. Tell him you're sick, food poisoning from dinner. Buy us a few more days. By the end of the week, he'll be in custody." I made the call right there from Charlotte's office, putting on my best weak and apologetic voice. Dad sounded annoyed but not suspicious. "Feel better soon, sweetheart. We'll reschedule for Friday." He had no idea that by Friday, his entire world would have collapsed. The cabin was small but comfortable, tucked away in the forest with no neighbors for miles. Mom and I spent 2 days there, barely leaving, jumping at every sound. Martha came by once with supplies and updates from Charlotte. The FBI was moving fast, building an airtight case. The SEC was freezing Richard's accounts. It was all coming together. On Thursday morning, I woke to the sound of gravel crunching outside. My heart stopped. It was too early for Martha, and no one else knew we were here. Mom was already awake, standing by the window, her face pale. "It's him," she whispered. "He found us." I looked outside and saw Dad's Range Rover parked in the driveway. He climbed out, along with 2 large men I didn't recognize. Security, probably. Or worse. He walked up to the front door and pounded on it with his fist. "Grace, Evelyn, I know you're in there. Stop this ridiculous game and come out." Mom and I looked at each other. We'd prepared for this possibility. Charlotte had given us a panic button that would alert the FBI, and we'd already pressed it. But it would take time for them to arrive. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. We had to stall. I opened the door but kept the chain lock on. "What are you doing here?" Dad's face was red with anger, all pretense of fatherly concern gone. "You think I'm stupid? You think I didn't notice you broke into my safe? That bitch of a lawyer you're working with filed papers this morning, trying to freeze my accounts, accusing me of God knows what." "Attempted murder," I said calmly. "Money laundering, fraud. Should I keep going?" His eyes narrowed. "Where is she? Where's your mother?" "Right here, Richard." Mom stepped into view behind me, and the expression on Dad's face was almost worth all the fear and pain. Pure shock, followed by rage. "You're supposed to be dead." he hissed. Sorry to disappoint you, Mom said, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it. But I'm very much alive, and you're finished. Dad tried to force the door, but the chain held. You don't understand what you're doing. I have friends, powerful friends. I'll crush you both. I'll make sure you lose everything. We already lost everything that mattered when we realized what kind of monster you are. I shot back. The FBI is on their way. You can run, but you won't get far. Every account you have is frozen. Every asset is flagged. It's over. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to break down the door. His face was purple with fury, veins standing out on his forehead. But then he heard it too. Sirens in the distance, getting closer. He looked at his security guys, who were already backing away, not stupid enough to stick around. This isn't over, he snarled at us. I'll get out of this. I always do. Not this time, Mom said quietly. We watched from the window as 3 FBI vehicles came screaming up the driveway. Agents piling out with guns drawn. Richard Miller, you're under arrest, the lead agent shouted. The whole thing took less than 3 minutes. They cuffed him, read him his rights, and stuffed him into the back of one of the vehicles. He kept screaming the whole time, threatening lawsuits, demanding his lawyer, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. But his voice got fainter and fainter as they drove away. Mom and I sank down onto the couch, adrenaline draining away, leaving us exhausted. An agent came to the door to take our statements, and Charlotte arrived an hour later, with more good news. They'd arrested Scarlett too, along with 3 of Richard's business associates. The evidence was overwhelming. Charlotte expected guilty verdicts on all charges. The trial took place 3 months later. I'd never been inside a courtroom before, and the reality was both more boring and more intense than I'd expected from TV shows. Days of testimony, expert witnesses explaining financial records, digital forensics specialists detailing the evidence from Richard's computers. Mom testified about the poisoning, Martha about helping fake the death, and I testified about what I'd overheard in the study and what I'd found in the safe. Richard sat at the defense table looking smaller somehow, diminished. His expensive lawyers did their best, but there was no defense against the mountain of evidence we'd provided. The prosecution played recordings of phone calls between Richard and his associates discussing the embezzlement. They showed the offshore accounts, the forged documents, the medical records showing digoxin in Mom's bloodstream. It was damning, all of it. Charlotte was brilliant. She cross-examined every witness with surgical precision, never letting Richard's lawyers create any reasonable doubt. When it was her turn to present our case, she did it with such clarity and power that even the judge seemed impressed. She laid out exactly how Richard Miller had systematically stolen from his own company, how he'd tried to murder his wife to cover his tracks, how he'd planned to manipulate his daughter into being his next victim. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty on all counts. Richard's face went white when he heard it. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later, and when that day came, she showed no mercy. 30 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 25. By the time Richard Miller got out, he'd be in his 80s, if he lived that long. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Questions flew from every direction. How did it feel to take down one of Portland's most powerful men? Was I afraid he'd come after me? What would I do now? Mom stepped forward to answer, and I was struck by how different she looked. Stronger, taller somehow. She'd started painting again, and the color had returned to her cheeks. This wasn't about revenge, she told the reporters. This was about justice, about making sure a dangerous man couldn't hurt anyone else, and it's about survival. Sometimes you have to fight back, even when you're afraid, especially when you're afraid. That's the only way forward. Someone asked if she'd ever forgive Richard. Mom smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Forgiveness isn't about him, it's about me. And I'm working on forgiving myself for staying as long as I did, for not seeing the signs sooner. That's enough for now. We left Portland a month after the sentencing. There was nothing left for us there but bad memories. Mom and I bought a small house in Cannon Beach, right on the Oregon coast. It's modest compared to the mansion in West Hills, but it's ours, really ours. Mom set up a studio in the sunroom and started teaching art classes to local kids. I opened my design studio, calling it Evelyn and Grace Designs. We work together sometimes, her paintings integrated into my graphic work. It's collaborative and healing. Martha visits often. She quit her job at the hospital after the trial, said it was time for a change. She's thinking about writing a book about her experiences as a nurse, and Mom is encouraging her. Charlotte stops by sometimes too, though she's usually too busy. Her phone's been ringing off the hook since the trial. Apparently, taking down Richard Miller made her the most sought-after financial crimes attorney on the West Coast. Life isn't perfect. I still have nightmares sometimes, dreams where I'm back in that study, or standing at the cemetery, or sitting across from my father at dinner while he tries to poison me. Therapy helps. Mom and I both go, sometimes together, sometimes separately. We're learning to process what happened, to understand that we were victims, but we don't have to stay victims. The house smells like oil paint and salt air most days. Mom's latest series is all wildflowers, the same Oregon blooms she used to paint before Richard tried to kill her, but these are different, bolder, more vibrant, full of life. She's selling them at a gallery in town, and they're doing well. People respond to the energy in them, the resilience. I've started dating again, though I'm cautious. Trust doesn't come easily after everything that happened. But there's a guy, a marine biologist who studies tide pools along the coast. He's kind and patient and doesn't push when I'm not ready to talk about my past. We take long walks on the beach, and he tells me about the creatures living in the spaces between the tides, how they adapt to survive in harsh conditions. It feels like a metaphor for my own life. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter from the prison. It was from Richard. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, his handwriting shaky and uneven. Grace, I'm sorry for everything. I was a bad father and a worse husband. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm getting help in here. Talking to counselors, trying to understand how I became the person I became. I hope you and your mother have found peace. I showed it to Mom. She read it twice, then handed it back to me. What do you think? I asked. She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the ocean. I think people can change. I think anyone can wake up one day and decide to be better, but I also think it's too late for him. The damage is done. Whether he's sorry or not doesn't change what he did. Do you think I should write back? That's up to you, sweetheart. Whatever you need to do to heal. I never did write back. Maybe that makes me cold, but I decided I didn't owe him anything, not even acknowledgement of his apology. He'd stolen enough of my life already. I wasn't going to give him any more of my energy. A year after the trial, on a sunny afternoon in September, Mom and I were sitting on our front porch, watching the waves roll in. She'd just finished a large commission, a series of paintings for a hotel in Astoria, and we were celebrating with wine and chocolate. The conversation drifted, as it often did, to that night at the cemetery. I never asked you, I said suddenly. That text message, the one that said you weren't dead. You told me Martha helped you fake your death, but who sent that message? Your phone was supposed to be in the casket. Mom looked at me, and there was something in her eyes I couldn't quite read. Amusement? Wonder? I didn't send it, she said quietly. What do you mean you didn't send it? Then who did? She shook her head. I honestly don't know. I gave my phone to Martha to put in the casket with the body. She confirmed she did exactly that. But somehow, some way, you got that message. And it brought you to me at exactly the right moment. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms despite the warm sunshine. That's impossible. I know, but it happened. Martha and I have talked about it a dozen times. She swears she put the phone in the casket and that it was turned off. No battery, no signal, nothing. And yet you got that message. Maybe it was delayed somehow, sent before you gave her the phone? I checked the timestamp. It was sent 20 minutes after the funeral ended, long after the phone was supposed to be buried. Mom took a sip of her wine, looking thoughtful. I've stopped trying to explain it. Some things just are. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was the universe deciding we deserved a second chance. Maybe it was your grandmother, my mother, who died when you were 3. She always said she'd watch over us. I wanted a rational explanation. I'm a designer, someone who deals in pixels and measurements and concrete realities, but I couldn't find one. The message had come from Mom's phone when her phone was 6 feet underground in a casket. It had led me to her at exactly the moment when everything could have gone terribly wrong. If I hadn't gotten that message, if I hadn't gone to the cemetery that night, Mom would have been alone. Richard might have found her first. Everything might have ended differently. Whatever it was, I said finally, I'm grateful. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. Me too, baby, me too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Mom asked the question that had been hanging between us for months. Do you think you'll ever go back to Portland? I considered it. Portland was where I'd grown up, where I'd built my early career, where I had friends and connections. But it was also where Richard Miller had nearly destroyed both of us. Maybe someday, I said. For a visit, but this is home now. This is where we rebuilt ourselves. Good, Mom said, because I can't imagine living anywhere else. That night, I lay in bed listening to the ocean, thinking about everything that had happened. From the funeral in the rain to the terrifying message to finding Mom alive to the dangerous game we'd played to bring Richard down to the trial and finally to this quiet life by the sea. It felt like a story, something that had happened to someone else, but the scars were real, the memories were real, the healing was real. I thought about the text message again, that impossible message that had started everything. I'm not dead, come to the cemetery now, tell no one. 7 words that changed my entire world. I'd probably never know where it really came from. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that it had given me my mother back. It had given us both a chance to fight back, to reclaim our lives, to become the people we were meant to be. Rolling over, I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and pulled up that old message thread. It was still there, preserved in my phone's memory. Mom's name, the timestamp, the message itself. I stared at it for a long time, this little digital mystery, this ghost in the machine. Then I typed out a message of my own, not to send to anyone, just to put into words what I was feeling. Thank you. Whoever you are, wherever that message came from, thank you for giving me back my mother. Thank you for giving us both a second chance. We didn't waste it. I saved it as a note in my phone, then put the device away and closed my eyes. Outside, the waves kept rolling in, steady and eternal, washing away the past and bringing in the future. Somewhere in a prison cell in Oregon, Richard Miller was probably lying awake too, thinking about his own choices, his own mistakes. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel much of anything for him, actually. He was just a cautionary tale now, a reminder of what happens when greed and cruelty consume a person. Mom was right. This didn't feel like victory. It felt like freedom, the freedom to wake up each morning without fear, the freedom to paint, to design, to love, to trust again. The freedom to be ourselves, fully and completely, without having to shrink or hide or please anyone else. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee. Mom was already up, standing at her easel in the sunroom, working on a new piece. I brought her a cup, and we stood together watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. "What are you working on?" I asked. She stepped back so I could see. It was a self-portrait, but not like any she'd done before. In the painting, she was standing at the edge of the ocean, arms spread wide, face turned toward the sunday. Her expression was joyful, free, alive. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was the outline of another woman, older, fading into mist. Her mother, I realized. My grandmother. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "It's called rebirth," Mom said, "because that's what this is. We died in that old life, you and me. And we came back as something better, something stronger." I hugged her, this woman who'd risked everything to escape a monster, who'd trusted me to help her, who'd taught me that survival wasn't enough. You had to live, really live, not just exist. I love you, Mom. I love you too, Grace, more than you'll ever know. We spent the day working side by side, her painting, me designing a new website for a local restaurant. It was peaceful, ordinary, perfect. Around noon, Martha called to tell us she'd sold her book proposal to a publisher. We celebrated with champagne and lobster rolls from the place down the beach. Charlotte emailed to say Richard had lost his first appeal. We toasted that too. As evening fell, I took a walk alone on the beach, letting the cold water wash over my bare feet. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, standing in the rain at a funeral, believing her mother was dead, not knowing the darkness that was waiting for her. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone harder but also kinder, someone who understood that strength wasn't about never being hurt. It was about getting hurt and choosing to keep going anyway. I thought about Richard's apology letter, still tucked away in a drawer somewhere. Maybe one day I'd read it again and feel something other than numbness. Maybe one day I'd write back. But not today. Today was for living, for being present, for appreciating this second chance Mom and I had been given. When I got back to the house, Mom was sitting on the porch again, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. I sat down beside her, and we watched the sun set over the Pacific, the sky turning from blue to purple to deep black studded with stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, was Portland, was the courthouse where we'd testified, was the prison where Richard was serving his time. But here, in this moment, none of that mattered. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently?" I asked. "If you hadn't figured out what he was doing? If you hadn't faked your death?" Mom thought about it. "Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on it. What matters is what did happen. We survived. We fought back. We won." "We won," I repeated, and the words felt good in my mouth. True. Real. We had won. Not just in court, but in life. We'd taken back our power, our autonomy, our future, and that was worth everything. Later that night, I lay in bed one more time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sound of the waves. My phone buzzed with a text from the marine biologist, asking if I wanted to go kayaking tomorrow. I smiled and texted back yes. Life was happening again. Normal life. Good life. The kind of life I'd never thought I'd have when I was standing in that cemetery, terrified and confused, staring at my supposedly dead mother. I pulled up that mysterious text message one last time. "I'm not dead. Come to the cemetery now. Tell no one." 7 words that had saved us both. 7 words that I'd probably never understand. And as I stared at those words, the screen flickered, just for a moment, and a new message appeared underneath, though nothing had actually been sent. "Live well." I blinked, and it was gone. Just a glitch, probably. A trick of the light or a tired brain seeing things that weren't there. But it felt like a benediction, a final message from wherever that first impossible text had come from. Permission to let go, to stop looking backward, to embrace the future. We will, I whispered to the darkness. We will. And we did. Mom and I lived well. We built a life worth living. We became people worth being. And every single day, we remembered how close we'd come to losing it all, which made us appreciate every moment we had even more. That's the gift trauma gives you if you let it. Not just survival, but a deep, bone-deep gratitude for being alive. Richard Miller tried to bury us. Instead, he buried himself. And from that grave, we rose again, stronger and more whole than we'd ever been. That's not revenge. That's not even justice, really. That's rebirth. That's what happens when you refuse to let someone else write the ending to your story. You write it yourself, and you make it beautiful.